here with Melissa of Hone and Equipment. Welcome. Tell us about yourself.
So I'm Melissa Petersmann. I'm from Cheyenne, Wyoming. That's where I live right now. I was born and raised in Wyoming. I work for Hone and Equipment here in Cheyenne, and I've been a heavy equipment mechanic for going on 5 years now. I worked at a truck stop for about 5 months, but I don't really count that into my experience. I only really count my heavy equipment stuff. So as far as that, I'm almost at 5 years of experience with that.
Is a Deere like a Deere dealership then?
Yes.
Okay, got it. And what made you go into this, not even heavy equipment, but like diesel mechanics altogether? What prompted you to look into that as a career choice?
Well, my dad's a logger.
Okay.
So I kind of grew up around the logging equipment, and he fixed all his own stuff. So I was always around it, but I wasn't really into actually fixing anything until my junior and senior year in high school, where I met a guy, which is actually the guy I'm still with.
Okay.
And he was going to WyoTech, and he was going to be a mechanic, diesel mechanic too. And I started helping him work on his truck that he had at home at the time. And I was like, I actually really like this. This is fun. And I started thinking about it, and I got, I've always been into diesels more than gas trucks. And, semis especially were my thing. I loved semis. So when I came to deciding what I was going to do after high school, it was either horse training or go to WyoTech for diesel mechanics. And I'm like, well, if I do horse training, I'm not going to be able to afford horses.
Right.
If I do the diesel mechanics, that has a really high possibility that I'll be able to afford horses. I might not have as much time to train them as I want, but at least I can own my own horses, which would be nice. And I thought that was a smarter choice, and it turns out that was definitely a good choice.
Good.
So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
How...
So I started in the truck field, and I started at a truck dealership, and the reason I got into Deere is because they were the only people that would hire me at the time. That wasn't a night shift. So that turned out great.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
And how was your experience at the program? Like when you were going to the trade? Yeah, yep.
I loved it. I loved WyoTech. When I was going, they were having some issues with the people who own them. And they went through a couple of phases where they changed ownerships a couple of times. And towards the very end, a bunch of instructors, really good instructors, ended up getting laid off or fired because they were trying to cut costs. But before, the instructors there were great, and the programs were great, especially for people like me. I was lucky to change my own oil when I started at WyoTech. I didn't start I helped Matthew do things here and there, but as far as doing things on my own, I was lucky to be able to change my own oil by myself.
That's awesome.
So that WyoTech helped me out a lot with that.
Good.
And being able to take that into a level where I was hireable for other companies.
Good.
So, and they have a new owner now, which is awesome. I've talked to the new owner of WyoTech, and he's really good.
Good.
So,
and how long was the program?
I went for about a year.
Okay.
So I did heavy equipment, or not heavy equipment, I did heavy duty diesel for a few months. I did the main courses, the core courses, and then I took advanced diesel for a couple months, and then I did chassis fabrication for a couple months, which is welding, setting up, spring rates and stuff for race cars, building roll cages, stuff like that. I took it more for the welding skills because that's really important in this industry, is to be able to weld.
Yep. And for anyone who is joining us and who didn't see my last video, the reason why I'm doing these is because I work with people in the shop. Those are my clients. I go into the heavy equipment maintenance facility or the truck maintenance facility, and I work with them directly to help them with stuff. And I kind of noticed, and I told you about this on the phone, I kind of noticed that this group of people they have so many responsibilities all day. They wear so many hats, and they have to know so much stuff, but yet I feel like they are the least appreciated of the team, especially in heavy equipment. So if you have your construction companies and stuff, you've got your project managers, your estimators, your procurement people, then you have your techs, and the maintenance team, and I feel like they just kind of get not forgotten, but they're just underappreciated. So that's why I wanted to make these videos this year. I'm trying to do one a month where I just promote someone in that position, get to know their story, and help people see them, see how important they are, and then know that it's a great career option. And I thought it was awesome to get with you because you're obviously a young woman, and so I wanted to hear from your point of view what the career path is like. So going back to your time at WyoTech, were you the only female in your class?
No, there were actually quite a few.
That's great. That surprises me. Okay.
They were iffy. There was a couple girls that, actually quite a few of them, that didn't really want to be there, or they wanted to be there, but they didn't want to work hard for the grades. They didn't want to work hard for, and there's plenty of guys that did it too. You know, it was just more obvious when the women did it because there weren't as many of us. But there were quite a few pretty good ladies that came out of the similar year range that I came out of.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
So I'm the secretary for a fleet maintenance council up here, which focuses more on the trucking side. And we do a lot of work with the trade schools in the area, and we do scholarships. And I think I've seen one girl come through. So that's awesome. How about transitioning into, you know, the career world once you graduated from your program? How has that been?
It's interesting. Every shop I've started at, everybody's happy to have me, but they're scared to talk to me. They're scared to say the wrong thing, you know, because they don't want to get turned into HR right away because they made a joke, you know, or whatever. It's a little uncomfortable for them when I first start and do a shop, but once they get to know me and they realize that I have worse mouth than they do, then we're good. You know, they're...
Yep.
So once they get to know me and get to know that they don't have to treat me any differently because I'm not going to just turn them into HR for every little thing, then it eases out. And I like it. I like working with guys.
Good.
You know, I think I've only had one guy out of the entire, I've worked for 3 shops now, and I've only had one guy ever have an issue that I was there. So, and he was an old timer, and he didn't like that I was the other construction mechanic in a Deere dealership for ag at the time. I was working on ag at the time. And I think he saw me as a threat to his job because I was the only other person in the shop that was working on construction, and I was doing a decent job at it. And he had a lot of mess ups and had a lot of screw ups, so we didn't really get along very well. But that was really the only guy. Other than that, all the other, 100 guys I've worked with have been great.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, and now I'm sorry, I'm kind of veering away from the questions, but I'm just kind of going with it.
That's okay.
Do you feel like it's worse to talk about it? Do you think that's going to make us feel more awkward being different genders, like in the workplace, especially in this industry? Do you think we should talk about it more or just not even mention it?
That's a hard one. I mean, I'm a believer that if you want to be treated like one of the guys and you don't want to be treated differently than one of the guys, you need to perform and act like one of the guys.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta be to their standard, or better, either way. So, you know, I think talking about it is helpful in the sense of kind of showing what young women that you don't, it might be different than what they're thinking it might be like, but so I'm trying to prepare them for, you know, the awkwardness of when they first start. And there's awkwardness with new people all the time.
Right.
It's just with men, you know, guys are a little skittish with that. Not that they, you know, they just don't want to offend you.
Yep.
Which is nice of them.
Yep.
But also, on the other hand, you know, when you're at work, you know, not trying to pull the girl card, I think is really important.
I agree.
You know, you got to do your job and you got to do it well, and you can't have the excuses.
Yep.
You know, if you have a legit problem and something legitimately is a problem and it's happening and needs to be fixed, that's one thing. You know, but pulling the girl card just doesn't doesn't work for the rest of the girls that aren't doing that.
I agree.
So,
I'm the only female on our sales team and out in the field, and then most of my clients are men. I have a few women, but most of them are men. And like you, this will be my 7th year next year. I've only had 2 experiences that stick out in my head that are like, that was not right. Everybody else has just been awesome, respectful. I never felt like I was really treated differently. I mean, I'm sure there have been times where I felt like, okay, I kind of got to prove myself a little bit, but if you know your stuff and if you present yourself well, it seems like there's really no barrier to entry.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think that, and then I hear horror stories from other women, and it's just like, I guess it's case by case, but
yeah. Well, and your presentation comment has a lot to do with it.
Exactly.
How you present yourself and how you carry yourself has a lot to do with it.
I agree.
Guys get pushed back too. Guys have horror stories of going out to job sites and being cussed at by customers and being completely and totally disrespected by customers too, and a lot of it is, I mean, how you carry yourself and how you present yourself, man or woman.
Yep. I agree, because I bet you more times than not, we're not going to be the ones getting cussed at or screamed at, whereas the man is, So,
probably not.
Yeah, I see that. I also feel like I have the ability to just kind of walk into a shop if the door is open, and nobody's going to kick me out, whereas I see my male counterparts try to do that, and they are like, no, you need to go sign in at the front desk. What are you doing back here? Get out of here.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there is a little bit of an advantage at times as well. So,
I agree with that.
So that's good to hear. That makes me really optimistic. I'm glad you're having a good experience, and I think other girls and women are going to be relieved to hear that you're having a good experience. So I'll kind of go back to the questions that we had discussed beforehand. What do you love about your career?
I love that it's rewarding. If you work hard, you're going to get a good result out of it. It's completely based on your abilities and your work ethic, and I love how rewarding it is. It's really cool when you put 40 hours worth of work into a motor and you start it up for the first time and it just runs beautiful and it drives out of the shop and doesn't come back. That's awesome, and that you can't beat that. I don't think you can beat that. There's a lot of other industries that have that same thing, but for me, that's the big thing, and I love fixing things. I love tearing stuff apart. I love the whole aspect of it. I love the challenge and everything.
Yeah. Do you think it's a little appealing that it's an unconventional job as well?
I think there's a lot of romanticized envisionments of it.
Yep.
If that makes sense, I do think people are romanticizing especially being a girl in the field. It is hard work, and you do get dirty a lot, and it's not always the funnest day, and it happens to everybody when you fix something and you think it's fixed, and then you got to rip it back apart again because something's not right. It sucks, and I don't think people, I do think some people go into the field thinking that it's all the good, glorious engine builds that you get to, and it works just perfect all the time, and that's just, especially your first 2 years, that's not how it works.
Right.
You mess so much shit up, and it's just that's how you learn.
Yep.
And, people need to be prepared to don't beat yourself up over it or quit because you messed something up. So, I think people romanticize the vision of being a mechanic, but they don't necessarily think about the other side of it too.
Sure.
When you mess up, I haven't done this, but, if you forget to put a cam bearing in wrong in one of our motors and you don't line up the oil lines right, you trash a $79,000 motor.
Yep.
That's kind of the reality of it. When I first started, I forgot to lock a coupler on an excavator and dropped a breaker and ripped $1,000 worth of hoses off the excavator. So it happens, but, it's not all roses and fun.
I cannot imagine the feeling that you had when that happened.
It was terrible. It was terrible. And the salesman with the customer was standing right there.
Oh, no.
It was terrible. Oil sprayed everywhere. It was terrible.
I'm so sorry.
It happens. So
you live and learn, I guess. Yeah, he'll never do that again.
No. If there's a mechanic that tells you they never mess anything up, they're lying.
Right.
Yeah, so.
What, is there anything that you think it could be improved upon, or is there anything that really bothers you about the career?
The glorification of women in the industry is a bother for me. People glorify women doing a job. Like, that's what it is. It's your job. You're supposed to do it. So, like, I'm proud of what I do, and I'm proud of my accomplishments, but it's not because I'm a girl that did it. Where there's a lot of glorification of being a woman in the field or women in the field, and I wish that would change a little bit, and have more on an equal playing field, because it kind of skipped stages. It used to be women were looked down upon.
Yep.
And, people didn't think they could do it. They were looked down upon for trying. Why do you want to be like a man? And then it totally skipped the equalness and then escalated to where now women are the glorified people in the industry.
Do you, and when you say glorified, are you referring to like companies that are doing like diversity hiring where they might hire someone based on their gender versus their ability to do the job well, or their qualifications, something like that?
So I actually have a story about that.
Okay.
So this is a direct experience as to why it irritates me. I got hired on an ag dealership, and I already had a couple years John Deere experience in construction, so I figured that's why they had hired me, because I had already worked on the machines. I already knew the system. I knew how to use the computers. Well, here we are a year later, and my boss pulls me into the office, and he's like, "Hey, Melissa, I have an application on my desk I want you to look at." And I'm like, "Okay, well, it's not really my job, but I guess whatever." And it's an application of a girl from WyoTech, straight out of WyoTech, that wants to come and work for us. And I was like, "Okay, well, that's great, but do we have, what's our options? Why are you asking me about this?" And he's like, "Well, we've got another guy that we want to hire. He's got 5 years of experience, or 4 or 5 years of experience on John Deere ag. He lives in Indiana, and he wants to move out here and work for us." I'm like, "Okay, so why are we considering, man or woman, why are we considering somebody straight out of school when you can hire somebody with experience, especially on combines, which is what we were short of, is combine mechanics? Why are we not hiring this guy? He's got all the experience. Why are we considering other people? Unless, obviously, there's other people who are similarly qualified," and there wasn't. And he straight told me, he's like, "Well, this company wants to diversify more, and we think we can do that by hiring more women." And then instantly I'm like, "Well, what the fuck? Is that why I'm hired? Because I want to be hired because I'm good at my job. I don't want to be hired from and he was kind of backtracked, "No, you had the most experience out of everybody we had hired at the time." But it makes you kind of feel like your job's not as valued as much.
Yep. Your qualifications are overlooked.
Exactly.
Yep. I get it. I've been there as well.
He didn't end up hiring the guy. After he talked to me and talked to the foreman, he did end up hiring the guy, which was a good choice. He was a good mechanic. But,
good.
The fact that he was considering the girl solely because she was a girl bothered me.
Yep. I agree completely.
That's what I don't like in the industry.
That's a great point. Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. Are you content in your current position, or do you have some other goals or aspirations within the industry someday? What do you see yourself? Do you see a 5-year plan?
5-year plan would probably be just to be the top mechanic.
Okay.
I'm close now, but I want to be the best. I want to be the best that I can be as a mechanic. And I know that's hard to accomplish. It's actually impossible to accomplish because you learn something every day.
Right.
And you get better every day. But I do want to be a foreman at some point or a service manager at some point, but I want to have the skills to back that.
Okay.
I want to be good at what I'm doing now before I am put in a position to tell other people what to do.
Yep.
You know, I want the experience to when I tell you, hey, you need to pull that axle and it'll take you this many hours. It's because I've done that job before and I know how long it should take. Not because I'm looking at a computer and just guesstimating how long it should take and I've never actually done it before. You know, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So I do want to move up, but I'm not quite to that point yet where I'm wanting to.
Do you mind sharing how old you are?
I'm 24.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a
Well, I
great
still
5-year
got
plan
time.
to be a top mechanic by, right around 30. I mean, that's an awesome goal, I think. I
That's
would
what I'm
be
hoping for.
super impressed if I walked into a shop and someone my age was the top mechanic. That's a woman. I mean, it would be like, dang, that girl's awesome. So, cool. All right. Let me see. My questions disappeared here. What keeps you motivated?
Well, paychecks help.
Well, right. But it's a tough job. I have to imagine some days you're exhausted and you don't feel like doing the work.
The whole goal of wanting to be as good as I can be and improving at a faster rate than, I'm really hard on myself, so I always want to improve faster than I am. But that is what drives me because I want to get better at things. I want to do things better and I want to gain more skills as I go. So that's what keeps me motivated is to continue to better myself.
Awesome.
If that makes sense.
Yep. Love it. Do you work well with everyone on your team, would you say?
For the most part.
Yeah.
There's people here and there. The last shop I worked at there were so many different types of people that worked there. There was no way you could get along with all of them. But for the most part, I get along with pretty much everybody I work with.
Nice.
For the
Good.
most part.
Yep. And your current company is very easy to work for, you would say?
We've had some run-ins here or there, but there's a reason. I started with this company I work with now.
Okay.
And I left to go to a different dealership when I moved back to Wyoming. They didn't have a store built yet in Wyoming. That's why I traded dealerships, or in the area that I live in. So I went back to them for a reason, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Not that I appreciate everything my other employer did for me. And I gained a lot of experience, especially working on the ag side. Ag is just a whole other animal than construction. But
Yep.
There's a reason why I came back to Haunted.
And that was going to be my next question is, right now at where you're at, how much of it is ag and how much of it is construction? Or do they separate those facilities completely?
It depends on the dealership. Haunted equipment is only construction.
Okay.
But we're also like a Manitowoc and Grove crane dealership.
Okay.
And we're also a work-in paving equipment dealership.
Yep.
The last dealership I worked at was ag and construction. I worked at the ag-only store for a while, which we did do some construction here or there. And then I transferred down to the Fort Collins shop, which did ag and construction in the same store, which was actually really cool because I could work on both
Right.
under the facility legally.
So how do they, at where you're at now then, if they've got all three of those different avenues, how do they split that up in the shop? Are there different bays that are dedicated to work in Deere, construction, and the cranes, or are they different buildings? How do they...
So in the big dealership, the bigger facilities, they have Deere mechanics, ag mechanics, crane mechanics, and the crane people do have their own bays within the shop because they need long ways bays with 2 overhead cranes to do the pull
Sure.
boom sections out.
Yep.
So they're set up a little differently. In the smaller shops, it's you just have to work on whatever is there.
Okay.
They don't really set out who does what because you don't have enough mechanics to do that. So.
Got it. Awesome. Do you have any advice for kids or girls or anyone looking or considering a career in this industry?
I guess my first piece of advice would be, God, that's a hard one.
I know it is.
Get a basic understanding of what you're trying to do. I guess, like, there's been kids that come into the industry and, they show up at a job and they're like, wait, I have to do more than hook a computer to it?
Right.
And they're shocked because they were totally under the understanding that they could just fix everything on a machine with a computer. And while you can, there's a lot of computer work to these machines nowadays. That's also not, there's a whole nother part of it that's physical repairs and removal and replacement of components. So getting a good basic understanding of what you're actually trying to do is a good start. Yep. And then figuring out a goal of, okay, I want to work on cars, or I want to be on a monster truck team, or equipment, whatever it is. Start somewhere, because once you get past school, nobody cares where you went to school. After your first job you land, nobody cares where you went to school.
Yep.
Everybody cares about your years of experience.
Yep.
And the more years of experience you get, the less schooling matters. So the schooling is a really essential thing to get you into that first job. So that's the most important part of your planning, I think, is planning that out correctly. And, be prepared to work hard. Because especially nowadays, with the generation we have, people make fun of millennials for being lazy, but it's true. That stereotype is there for a reason.
Yep.
So you gotta kind of prove yourself. You gotta prove yourself. You can't expect to get a free ride for anything. You gotta work hard. You gotta prove yourself, which is the way it should be. But you can't expect to just be handed things. Once school's over with, you gotta be willing to take your career in your own hands and just go. Absolutely. And do your own thing and work hard for it. So.
Perfectly put, and I agree. And I think that the advice or the idea that experience is more important than where you went to school is spot on for any industry, because I know so many people going to like 4-year universities for whatever their major is. They don't realize that either, and they think that this piece of paper from this fancy school is going to get them this dream job, but it's not. It's all about your experience with working. So that's a perfect point.
But you always got to be, you can't expect going off the dream job comment. No. You can't expect yourself to do a year's worth of school and then go into a shop and do an engine rebuild.
Yep.
That's not going to happen. They are not going to trust somebody with 1 year of experience to be rebuilding a $79,000 motor, for the example I gave earlier. You got to be patient with yourself, and you got to prove to these people you can, you got to prove yourself that you're good at what you do and that you're exceeding, because you can't just expect to get thrown into like engine rebuilds and transmission rebuilds and whatever without being the oil change person for a few months.
Right.
That's just how it works for everybody. It's, you can't get mad at a company for not throwing you into big jobs right away. That's not going to happen for anybody. And if they do that, it's because they're desperate and they don't have anybody else to do it.
Right.
And at that point, take the chance and do a good job and prove that you can do it.
2 questions for you off of that. How many open positions do you guys currently have for mechanics and techs?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think we have one. I'm not sure on that, though. A lot of companies, including ours, had to stop the hiring process because of the COVID stuff. So I don't actually have an accurate question to that.
But take COVID out of it, you would say that the industry could use more people?
Oh, yeah. Our shop that I used to work for down in Fort Collins, which was a big facility, they were always trying to hire 3 or 4 mechanics. They have 3 or 4 mechanic positions open all the time.
Yep.
And that's true with most big shops.
Yep.
There's always a position open for a mechanic.
That's my experience as well. Everywhere I go, people are hurting for talent. Second question, you talked about being the oil change person. How important is oil to your job? I have to throw that in there.
No, it's fine. No, I actually thought about this question earlier today, just for you. So, people underestimate the importance of oil, I think, because back to it's a $79,000 motor.
Yep.
Or a $20,000 transmission. You can't, the oils and your maintenance intervals and the quality of the oil you're using can make the difference between a motor lasting 3,000 hours and a motor lasting 13,000 hours. And that's all completely dependent on the owner and how they take care of it. And the oil and lubrication part of that and the servicing is one of the most important parts of that equation.
That makes me so happy to hear.
Well, it's the truth. You get people, with 2,000-3,000 hours on their motor, and they're like, well, I don't understand why this isn't working. I don't understand why it's blowing up. John Deere sucks. That's always their answer. It's John Deere's fault. It's like, you haven't changed the oil in 2,000 hours, man.
Oh, my God.
What did you expect?
Yeah, if there's any left in it at that point. Jeez.
Same with greasing.
Yep.
People complain about, having to get their machines line bored because their pins wore through the bushing.
Yep.
It's like, well, if you would grease it, once a year would have been better than what you were doing.
Right.
The oil, that's a really important part of it, and especially the servicing and the periodic maintenance and the day-to-day maintenance is what makes the difference between a machine that looks like a piece of shit in 2,000 hours and a machine that looks new when it has 10,000 hours still on it.
Yep.
So.
Love it. Do you have a favorite piece of equipment to work on?
Yes.
Okay.
So, I have a big soft spot for 9R tractors.
Okay.
The big 4-wheel drive tractors. And I have a soft spot for excavators.
Okay. Yep.
I love excavators. Those two are at a tie. I love those two machines.
Why those? Any particular reason?
The 9R tractors mainly because they're just giant. They're a big piece of machinery, and it's really cool. I love how they work. And every job you do on them is a big job. And they're just fun. They're big, giant ag tractors. Who can't love a big, giant ag tractor with 8 giant tires on it?
Right.
It's fun. And then the excavators, I love operating excavators. They're my favorite to run. And how they're designed is really nice. And I like excavators. I guess I don't really have a good reason why. I mean, maybe they were my favorite Tonka toy in the sandbox when I was little, but I love them.
Excavators and haul trucks or rock trucks are my favorite too.
Yeah, rock trucks are cool.
Yep.
I don't have experience on those though.
Well, have you had a crazy, awesome project that you've gotten to work on? What's your craziest story? Anything that you can think of? Or most horrific, this thing was blowing up, falling apart.
Well, I did have to take a front axle out of one of those 9R tractors, and it was a suspension front axle on this particular tractor, and I had to split it apart because it was leaking at the sections, and that was a big job.
Okay.
I think my favorite job that I've done to date was I had a skidder in the shop. One of my dad's buddies had hauled his skidder to the shop for me to work on, and I got to take the rear axle out of it, and the diff lock was fucked up, so I had to fix the diff lock, fix all the brake seals because it was overfilling. Got to do a valve adjustment, a bunch of servicing on it, some engine work on it, some injectors. That was probably my favorite job. It wasn't necessarily hard, but I love logging equipment.
Okay.
I don't get to work on it very much. So when I do get to work on it, it's fun. And I like it. The other job I can think of was I had to split an 8R. I I had to split to get to the pump drive housing that was leaking next bolts to the rear axle. On tractors, there's no frame. There's just a bunch of sections that bolt to each other. So you pretty much have to split the tractor in half, roll the back half of the tractor away from the front half, and then start splitting components off of that.
Wow.
And that was a pretty big job, and that was fun.
Cool.
You got to take the cab off and the fuel tank out, and it was fun.
Nice. All right. Is there any other challenges that you can think of that might be affecting the industry outside of COVID?
People don't want to work.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest struggle that the industry's having, is people don't want to work. You know, they don't want to work 10-hour days. And if they work 8-hour days, they sure as fuck don't want to be on their feet all day long climbing
Right.
up and down the godforsaken excavator. You know, they don't want to do that. They want that desk job that pays $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest struggle with the industry, is people don't want to do it.
I agree. They want to take the credit for it, but they don't want to do it. Yep.
Exactly.
Is there any advice that you could give vendors like myself for people who are providing you with services or parts or anything that you need to do your job well? Is there anything that we could be doing better?
I think being personable is a big component to that. You know, going off of tool trucks are a vendor that I deal with all the time. Being personable, showing up, being reliable is really important to us. And then the not being pushy part of it. You know, we've got a vendor that comes to our shop, and he's tried to get us to buy a new parts washer 3 or 4 times. We don't even use the parts washer we have. And, you know, last time he put a flyer on my boss's desk for a parts washer. And it's like, we told you 3 times we don't need another parts washer.
Yeah.
We've got 3 mechanics. We don't need another parts washer. So, like, things like that are a little irritating, but for the most part, I think vendors do a pretty good job.
Good.
You know, most of the vendors I've dealt with, you know, for people who restock our bolts in the shop and people who do things like that, so far I've had pretty good experiences with them.
Good.
If that makes any sense.
Yes. Yep. And again, I feel bad. I keep jumping around with these questions. This one might make some people feel a little awkward, but I think it's a good question to ask. So, like for yourself, let's say in a couple of years you decide you want to start a family. Do these companies, is there anything in your contract or have they brought anything to your attention when you were getting hired about like maternity leave and things like that? Is that something that's offered?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So mechanics, granted, there's not very many women, but mechanics get the same maternity leave as anybody else in the company.
Good.
My boss for the company I work for now, when I worked down in Denver, I was actually told specifically that if and when I want to start a family, they will work with me with maternity leave, and they have all that, and they can do all that.
Good.
So, there is, especially if you get into a company like a dealership that's a big company, they're going to take care of the maternity leave thing.
Yep.
You know, they're not going to not do that for you. So, and I know another lady mechanic who has a child, and you know, she just had a child not too long ago, and she got maternity leave, and she's a mechanic. So
good. I just felt like it was something important to ask because it might be on the mind of some woman or girl thinking about the industry, and she might think that could be a hindrance to the job.
Well, you got to think about these shops and these bosses. They aren't used to facilitating anything but men.
Yep.
Yep. The first shop I worked at, I had to share a bathroom with all the guys. Granted, it was just it was a single bathroom, but, you know, they weren't facilitated. You know, their lockers for all the guys were out in the shop.
Yep.
All the guys just changed out. You know, before I started, all the guys just changed out in the shop. The dealership, the Deere dealer I started at, Haunted in Commerce City, they had a girl working there already. So they had a women's bathroom. Granted, they were a bigger store, so they already had a women's bathroom. And they had converted one of the training rooms into our locker room, which was really nice. You know, you can't expect them to have all the facilities you need.
Yep.
Going into it, when I started in Cheyenne at the other company, the other dealership, they didn't have any facilities. I mean, they had a women's bathroom, but they didn't have any kind of women's lockers. And my boss just went out and bought a locker set it up in the women's bathroom for me. So you can't get scared when you walk into a shop and they're like, well, we don't have any facilities like that, because most of the time,
yep,
they're willing to work with you and buy whatever it takes to make you comfortable with where you are. So.
Similar instance, I had a friend recently, with everything that's going on right now in the world, I had a friend recently post something where the person that was featured in this post was a very accomplished person in their industry, but they were trying to make the point that they were frustrated because of their gender or race or whatever it was. They were kind of the first, and so they felt like they were upset. They felt like a victim that no one could help them with things, or they didn't make things, designed to fit them, or I don't want to get too much into the specifics here.
Yeah.
I don't want to make this about politics, but my thought was, is I could see this person having this kind of victim mentality, but they're very accomplished. And my thought was, okay, you know what? In my experience as a woman in this industry, I don't stop and get upset that I'm the first one with my staff, and I think, like, if they didn't have facilities or something like that, I wouldn't be upset. I think my first thought would be, okay, I'm the first. This is awesome. What can I do so that the people who come after me are set? How can I blaze this trail to make it better for the next ones? Yeah. So I think you kind of put that perfectly in what you said.
Yeah, because like you were saying, you can't expect every facility to have every hold on, let me roll up my window.
No problem.
You can't expect every facility to have everything you could possibly want and need.
Yep.
As man or woman, and for women especially, a lot of these shops, when they were first built, why would they have made a women's locker room? There was no point to do it. But a lot of them are totally and perfectly fine with making that happen, if that's what you need.
Yep.
So, and yeah, like you said, being the first person, it is kind of cool. You are the first one, but you can't play the victim card.
Exactly.
Because most people are willing to work with you if you don't play the victim card, most people are more than willing to work with you.
Yep.
To make you comfortable where you are.
Completely agree. Well, this is awesome. I love this. I hope that we can sit down again in like 5 years and do this again and see where you're at and see what things you have to add to it. But is there anything else that you'd like to add or tell to the kids who are considering this career, or the girls out there?
So there was one thing I think that you and me talked about on the phone, is you don't have to be the big buff. Oh, yeah. You don't have to be the big, giant, like, manly-looking girl to do this.
Yep.
Like I told you before, I started in the field and I weighed maybe 118 pounds.
Yep.
Maybe. The only reason I weigh almost 130 now is because I do CrossFit. So when I worked in Four Rivers and Cheyenne, the ag dealership, I was small enough to fit up the auger tubes in the combines. So instead of one of the guys having to fumble around trying to get one of those motors way up at the top, they just stuck me up in a ladder, and I stood up there and held the motor up for them so they could put the bolts in. Things like the guys aren't fitting up that. There's no way. But I could.
Yep.
So it's a trade. Yeah, as a woman, you're not going to be able to lift as much as the men, probably, unless you do heavy weightlifting or whatever, maybe. But it's not an issue if you can't lift what they can, or you're not as strong as them. Maybe you need some help loosening some bolts. That's not really a problem,
right?
Because they're going to need your tiny arms to go reach back underneath the machine and take a connector loose for them.
You make a good team with them.
yeah, it's a trade. Yeah, you're not a 6'7" guy that can torque 500 pounds with a 2-inch ratchet.
Right.
But that's an exaggeration. But it's not an issue. You don't have to be some giant, muscly lady to do it.
Yep.
You know,
And how tall are you?
I'm 5'5",
Okay.
5'6" Yeah, so I'm not very tall either. So
That's great. No, I agree.
the other thing I have to add to that is you don't have to worry about what size you are, because that doesn't matter. Most things are too heavy to lift anyways.
Yep.
The powerlifting guy across from you isn't going to lift that. You know, most things are done with a crane nowadays anyways, so it doesn't matter.
Yep. Good. Well, thank you. This is awesome. I love it. I'm going to have you back on someday.
Okay.
We'll do it again. If I'm ever out there, I'm definitely going to look you up.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I'm going to put your information up so if people want to follow you and check you out, they can do that. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.